We now have a special guest, Adam Bushnell, who is a children's writer. Hi, Adam.
Hello.
So, what made you want to get into writing children's books?
I've always loved books and I've always loved reading. I used to be a teacher and I just found that stories really captured children's imaginations and worked extremely well as hooks to hook children in to be interested in a variety of different ways. And I just wanted to be a part of that. I used to trial a lot of the stories that I wrote on the children that were working in my class, and it was really the children that kind of pushed me to start submitting things. I was teaching in London, and that was when I first started to write frequently, and that was when I first started submitting to publishing houses. And it was during that time that I met Michael Mapurgo. We used to take the children from our school to Michael Mapurgo's farm, which is called Nethercott. He was running a scheme called Farms for City Children. So I would take these students from an estate in South London, and we got to stay at Michael's farm for a week. And it was then that Michael heard me telling the children a bedtime story, and he recommended that I should start submitting to publishing houses.
How long have you been writing children's books for now?
For the last 10 years, I've written around about a book a year. I've now got 10 books published, and I'm a full-time author, travelling into schools, delivering workshops, which I love.
As you said, you travel around schools,
Yes, yeah.
and spreading, I guess, the joy of writing to children.
Hopefully.
Like, what made you want to do that as well as writing books?
I found that the stories that I was writing lent themselves to be linked to school curriculum quite precisely. I've got a book of Greek myths and legends, I've got a book of Viking myths and legends. So what I started doing is using my teaching background with my books to try and inspire children to want to write themselves, which is just my favourite thing to do. I love it. And it seems to work, which is fantastic. So this is a book of Victorian ghost stories called Gruesome Ghouls and Devious Devils. It's mainly stories from the UK, but a couple of stories from Russia as well. And this one's probably my best-selling book because children love ghost stories.
So why Russia as well as the UK?
It was supposed to be all about the UK, but I discovered a really good story called Baba Yaga Bony Legs, and the direct translation of Baba Yaga is Grandmother Ugly, and I couldn't not put that in. I just thought it was such an awesome story. This one, Pyramids and Pussycats, is a book of Egyptian myths, and it is a book of short stories, but the short stories all interlink, so it tells one complete story from the creation of the universe to a final big battle between the gods. And it contains every kind of major story that happened in ancient Greek mythology.
Wow.
This one, Invade and Settle, Raid and Meddle, is a book of Viking stories, and I've included the oldest story in the English language, which is the story of Beowulf, which is set in Denmark but was written in England, and the original manuscript is on display at the British Library. I do a lot of work around Beowulf and around Viking mythology, so this was a pretty easy book to write, and it's a book that I'm passionate about because of these wyrms. A wyrm is a legless dragon, and it is a dragon that the Vikings told a lot of stories about. And we in the northeast of England took these wyrm stories and turned them into worm stories. So the Lambton worm, the Sockburn worm, the Bamborough worm are all stories that are Viking in origin. And I've tried to put as many as I can into there.
Did you do anything specifically special on World Book Day?
World Book Day has become this massive phenomenon.
Yeah.
It's fantastic that so many schools and so many libraries and other organisations have really taken it on board. I was in a school in County Durham, and all the children were dressed up as various different book characters. We started off with a whole school assembly and shared some stories. I got the children acting out stories. Then I worked with each class, creating their own stories along different themes. Jumped straight on a train, headed down to London, and then I was working with some Year 9 pupils that night on creative writing techniques. So yeah, pretty busy day.
Very busy day
yeah,
for
it
you
was.
then.
Yeah, it was good though. I really enjoyed it.
Sounds really good.
Yeah.
So when you go into the schools, like what sort of activities will you get the children involved in to get them writing, I guess?
You need to bear with me on this one, but I
That's
use
fine.
a lot of weapons.
Right.
My house is absolutely rammed with suits of armour and Chinese dragon heads, and that I use an awful lot of props and resources to complement curriculum subjects and to fuel the writing. So if I'm asked to do something to do with Romans, I'll take in full Roman armour, shields, swords, spears,
Right.
etc.,
Wow.
and get the children to handle the artefacts
Yeah.
as fuel for the words that they're going to produce, as well as telling the stories from that era, etc. So, yeah, I use props, and my neighbours, see varied sights on a morning as I'm filling my car with, and my insurance is up to about £10 million.
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty high. Fortunately, touch wood, we haven't had any mishaps. The children absolutely love it. There's
Yeah, I bet
nothing
they
I've
do.
seen more engaging than children handling artifacts and discussing them. And even the most reluctant writers, the words just seem to pour out of them, and they want to write, which is the best feeling in the world for me. One of the most famous stories from the northeast of England is the Lambton Worm, which a lot of people know about. It was made famous in the Victorian times because Sunderland Empire turned it into a pantomime. Lewis Carroll was in the area. He went to see the pantomime. He watched the performance of the Lambton Worm, and he produced the poem of the Jabberwocky inspired by it,
Yeah.
which he put into Alice in Wonderland. And I do think our stories in the northeast are inspirational, and I
Yeah,
don't want them to be
definitely.
forgotten, which is why I put as many kind of local legends into my books as I can, such as the Sockburn worm, which is a less famous legend. There are worms all over the northeast of England.
It seems so, doesn't it? So what sort of things, because obviously you said like you bring in weapons that inspire
Yes.
the children from various eras, so what sort of things you like to write about in your stories? Because you said like you'd like to write about myths and legends.
Yeah,
and things.
I suppose myths and legends are the kind of backdrop to everything that I do. So even this novel that I'm writing at the moment, one of the characters is Medusa that's in it, but
yeah.
in a completely different context from other stories that have been told about her. And the books that I've written, even if I'm creating a new story, it will have a kind of myth and legend at the heart of it. I find that these are the oldest stories in the world, and the reason that they've lasted so long is just because they are so good.
Yeah.
And I just find that children really engage with them. They're timeless stories that they seem to want to still talk about and write about. And if I can hopefully inspire a child to read, that's fantastic for me. The reason that the book is always better than the film, in my opinion, is because reading allows you to climb inside the mind of another character. And if children are able to do that, then it means that they can empathize with that character. And if we can teach children how to empathize, if we can teach them empathy, I think it's the most important quality that any human being can possess. So I'm passionate about getting children reading.
Yeah. So is there any advice you'd like to give to any aspiring writers out
Getting
there?
published is very, very difficult, and it is an extremely competitive market, and
Yeah.
just be tenacious and stick with it and keep doing it. The more you write, the better you get, and no great painter was born with the ability to paint these masterpieces. The more you paint, the better you get, and the more you write, the better you get. So if there are any writers out there who have been rejected by publishers, just keep going, and it will happen. The more you write, it really will happen. And with children, I often am approached by children who say, I want to be a writer, or I
Yeah.
want to be an illustrator, and I just think that's fantastic to hear, and they should keep at it. It is a discipline to sit and write, but if you can adhere to that discipline, it just reaps great rewards. It's the best thing.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.